So I'm just going to quickly embarrass you and read your bios. That's all right. So to my left, Danny O'Malley is a Grammy-nominated and James Beard-nominated film director. He's best known for his work on Netflix's Chef's Table as co-executive producer and a director, where he's a key force behind the character-driven storytelling that's the show's signature. Danny has collaborated with bands across the U.S., including Tegan and Sara, The Rentals, The Decemberists, Kraftwerk, and more. His documentary States, from Tegan and Sara's release, Get Along, was nominated for a Grammy in the category of Best Long-Form Music Video. Danny made his mark in documentary television as a story producer, and his work has aired on Netflix, Fox Sports 1, and NBC. Danny and his directing partner, Rivest, PhD, won the Alfred P. Sloan Development Grant in 2017, which led to the creation of Canary, which you all just watched. Welcome, Danny. Rivest is an MIT-trained PhD neuroscientist. Having worked alongside Nobel Prize winner Dr. Susumu Tonegawa, his research has been published in two of the most highly renowned scientific journals, Science and Nature Neuroscience. Alex grew up in an environment where curiosity and question asking were highly valued, and he has dedicated his life to helping teach others about the wonders of the world. As an educator, he received the Angus MacDonald Award for Excellence in undergraduate teaching at MIT and founded the nonprofit Blue Kitabu, which built a sustainable primary school in central Ghana. As a science filmmaker, Alex's videos have accumulated over 70 million views online and have been featured everywhere from billboards in Times Square to installation in science museums and even an opera production of Das Rheingold. Welcome, Alex. Last but not least, Adam Paul Smith has spent over a decade working in film, TV, documentary, and live events. He's worked in motion picture, literary, independent, and international film at ICM, and then as an executive and creative producer at Act 4 Entertainment. The work has garnered awards, critical acclaim, and press from outlets including the New York Times and The Guardian. Growing up in apartheid South Africa and now living as an immigrant in the United States, Adam cares about using the power of story for good, intentionally building projects and teams around common cores. He's a big picture, outside-the-box thinker who is not afraid to challenge the status quo or roll up his sleeves and get dirt on his face, which I imagine you did a lot of on this film.
Yes.
So welcome. So many questions, and I'm sure you all have questions too, so we'll open to a Q&A in a minute. But I just wanted to start with, how did you find Lonnie's story? How did you come to this project?
So it started like around season 1 of Chef's Table. I met Alex at Shabu Shabu in Little Tokyo, not too far from here. And we had a conversation, and me being in television and him being a scientist, he said, you know, I watch all the science shows, and they all feel like homework. Like, I do it because I should, but I feel like there's something missing. And I was always a big science nerd, and I felt the same way. Like, you know, there's nice 5-minute segments in there, but you missed the whole thing. So we had this discussion, and basically he said, you know, I go to volcanoes, I go to all these places all over the world, and I'm always traveling, and the further off the path I go, there's always a scientist who can go further, where they say, you can't go past this point, and then there's a scientist working there. And he told me, as what happens when you work in TV, people pitch you their ideas. So he was like, I have an idea for a show. We take cameras to these places, and we just film it and give people a sense of what it's like to be there. And I was like, that sounds great, but that's not a TV show. So I told him, like, if you want people to know what it's like to live next to a volcano and to spend your whole life studying it and risking your life for it, you need to tell me a story of someone who did not give a shit about a volcano. And then throughout their life, they were chasing some dream, there was some turn of events, there were some challenges they faced. They found that volcanoes were the answer, and that was the only thing they were going to study for the rest of their life. I was like, if you can find me those people, I think we can make a TV show. And he said, I think we can do that. So we created a list of 500 scientists.
583.
Yeah, this is our dynamic. So we created this list, and we narrowed it down to 50 who we thought were most likely to be compelling. We talked to 30 of them. We had a grant from the Alfred P. Sloan Foundation to do this work and prove that scientists were interesting. And we met Lonnie during that search. And, 5 minutes in the call, he told an adventure story, which was what the film opened up with, and had us hooked. And then,
Like, this guy's interesting.
yeah, and then 40 minutes in, he had us crying, talking about his denial with his heart transplant. And Alex turned to me and said, if there's one story we tell in this world, it should be this one.
We're glad you did. Lonnie ends the film saying, I'm paraphrasing here, things are only impossible until they become possible. You won't know until you try, which when I watched it, I was like, that really knocked me back. And it must have been incredible to spend this much time with such a legend and to learn from him. I would love to just kind of hear any stories or lessons that you've learned from him in the process.
Well, the thing that we always say is that no one who has come across Lonnie's part that we know hasn't been changed for the better, right? And all of us, and we got the, I would say luxury sounds like the wrong word, to be going on an expedition up to 18,000 feet where you have 50% of the oxygen that we're breathing here. Doesn't sound like a luxury, but like we got the experience to do that with him and see what it is like firsthand. But yeah, I think there's no one that isn't positively impacted by his presence and what he's done. And I think that, through this film, I hope everyone sees that like we've really put a big spotlight that he deserved to have put on him. You want to tell a story?
I mean, I think for me, the thing that I loved about working with Lonnie and still to this day talking with Lonnie is he listens to everyone, right? You sit down and he's a man with many accolades and can kind of focus on other things, but he spends time hearing what your dreams are and trying to see how he can incorporate your dreams. I spent countless hours in a tent on a mountain talking about raising kids, right? And it's just awesome to be around him. He makes you feel loved and important, and the fact that he can push through really hard things makes you feel like you can do that too. And it just seeps into your soul in such a cool way. So I feel so honored to know him and have a lot of respect for him.
I think the moment that stands out for me is when we were heading to the mountain. We were hiking from the end of the road. Adam was carrying a camera.
Not my job, but I was carrying the camera.
I think we were all carrying a little bit of equipment. The rest of the equipment was going up on horses, and it was just exhausting. We were at elevation. I think we were at like 17,000 feet at that point. And I turn and see Lonnie, and then he sees me, and he just goes, "Do you feel the power?" Because his love of Qualcomm is that crazy that's just the thing he says. So
You can see it in his face when you're filming him, just like surveying the landscape, how deeply he feels it. That's amazing. But persistence and endurance are obviously such major themes, both physically and emotionally, in his work, his life, in the film, but also in the filmmaking process. I think it's insane that you were about at 18,000 feet with all your gear, trying to work without oxygen. Can you talk about that added layer?
I wouldn't say that was necessarily the hardest part in making this film. We started making this film 5 years ago, so it's a 5-year journey. And I think along the way, we were told many times, particularly at the beginning with bringing the cameras and a chef's table quality crew up to elevation, you don't need to do that. You don't need to bring that camera up there. You don't, and to Danny and Alex's credit, were fighting for, capturing this sort of epic landscape and the adventure that would then end up on a big screen. And you need that, quality crew and equipment to be able to do this. And so I think there's that. But to the fun part about like training and preparing for, which is not fun at all, going up at elevation, we had oxygen deprivation chambers that is fairly basic, but it's just this like plastic tent that encompasses you at night, and you have a machine next to you, and you can change the amount of oxygen to represent whatever it might be at that altitude, and you slowly just turn it up every night as you got more and more used to it. We had some of the crew, who I think Kate's here, go and actually do physical training with mask on, again, eliminate or reducing the amount of oxygen. And then we all had SpO2 monitors, so blood oxygen monitors on your finger, and essentially just like training yourself to breathe without, hyperventilating, without like, and just you're monitoring your heart, your blood oxygen level to be able to like keep it at the right level, right? So that's all the fun part. But I think that we kind of went into it not really knowing what we were getting into. Lonnie kind of gave us some tips, but quite honestly, I was desperate to find other resources to provide more information about what we're getting into. And then, you go and you acclimate. So you go up to, we start in Cusco, which is at what, 11,000 feet, and then you spend 2 days in Cusco, and you're just like, you feel the pressure, you feel the lack of oxygen. And then we went for a hike together, and we're like, see, can we handle the steps? And everyone was fine. So then we go to the next spot and we camp out, and that's a little bit higher, and you do that for 2 to 3 days, and everyone's okay, let's keep going higher. And then 3 weeks later, we're at the top of the mountain.
Yeah, I would say with elevation, the thing you don't really know is you're kind of drunk driving up there. Like, it's half as much oxygen as there is at sea level, so everything's more work. You can have your brain expand and kill you. Your lungs can fill up with fluid, and we didn't know any of this when we said
Would
we
you
were
have
filming.
taken the project had you known?
Absolutely.
Yeah, probably.
But I want to point out Kate here. We have another crew member here who came with us to the mountain, and wave, Kate, say hi. She was the one also training with oxygen deprivation. And when we said, "Do you want to go up this mountain?" she was like, "Yes." And the thing about these types of films, people need to share a dream right from the beginning, and you need to find people who care about the end goal. And I'm just so honored to have you here, and it's nice to see you.
Well, I love how that kind of echoes Lonnie's team building also, where it's like, he's like, I need people who have the vision to follow through.
I would say this, some people say when you make a documentary, it's always autobiographical, and I feel like there's a meta layer of this film where just every step of the way, it felt like we weren't going to make it. And it was just a testament of you just keep going, and every time it feels like the world is ending, you just don't have another
When you say
option.
when you feel like the world's ending, I mean, we've got to think about what happened in the last 5 years. The world shut down while we're in the middle of doing this. There were the editor was working out of his apartment, and the protests were happening. They like came through the front door, and there's like crazy stuff happened in the last 5 years, and that was while this whole thing was being made, and we continued to sort of keep going. And I think one of the cool things about finding a team, people who care about the underlying reason for why you're doing this, and then seeing the importance of it and learning about it. To be perfectly honest, like I learned so much in this about climate change. I learned so much about what a scientist has to go through in order to have not just uncovered the information that we just like kind of throw away and we're not really using. But also, again, just like making sure that when we all felt the sort of sense of responsibility to finish it and get it done.
Yep. Canary is our Calcaya. I mean, and we talk about it that way. It's the thing that for us changes everything, but you need to take your time and get it right.
Yeah, the film really ends in a call to action. So I think when you're talking about everything you've learned about the importance of telling this story and what you've learned about climate science, Regina, I think, ends by saying every person matters, which I also was another one that really stuck with me when I watched it. What do you hope that people do as a result of this film? Obviously, you're not just telling this story and hoping people are like, cool, like I'm done, you know, which I also prompts me to the QR code, what you can do.
Thank you.
I mean, I think there's a few things. One is part of it is looking inwards, right? Lonnie is the world expert telling the world, listen to the facts, right? And then his doctor tells him he has a failing heart and he doesn't listen to the facts, right? There's a level of denial that all of us have about the biggest existential crisis that we're facing. And it's something that we need to think about how we are facing our own denial. So as part one, I think it's important to think about that. I have hypocrisies. He has hypocrisies. We all do. And it's important to come to terms with those personally. Second is all of us do make a difference when we stand up together and care about something, and we make choices in the things we buy. We make choices in how much we fly. We make choices in, you know, everyday things in our communities, in our personal life, and then in politics. You know, when Inconvenient Truth came out, I did all the math and figured out how much sea levels would rise if Greenland melted, yada, yada, yada. I knew it to a T. And I've always just voted the right way, right? Someone said, I believe in climate change, I would vote with that person. And when I went with Lonnie onto this mountain, we started in Cusco, which gets all of its power from hydroelectric power from the runoff from the glacier. We then took this journey up the river all the way, and we saw the breadbasket for 2.5 million people. And you see how much the water from the glacier supports millions of people. Then we got to the glacier. It's the largest tropical ice cap on the planet. And I turned to Lonnie and I said, when will this glacier be gone by? And he said, by the time my daughter is my age, it's gone. And if you think about the chaos that comes from that, people needing to move, to find food, to find water, to change their power system, all in the course of 30, 35 years, I realized just voting was not the right, I needed to do more. And I think we all need to find what that more is. And there's no single solution, but there's a lot of little solutions, and we all need to be doing something. And there's some guidance, I think.
Yeah, so what we did intentionally with this is that we wanted to give audience members who are inspired to want to do something a place to go to do something. And we have a website that will guide you on that journey. And one of the very first things that we did after about 5 years of looking at all the different solutions that were presented or that I came across in our research, everything felt like it was either not enough or it was too much, whatever. And I think to what Alex is saying is a really important part here, which is to just kind of reflect on your own world and your own what you can do, what you're capable of, what you're excited about. I think it was Jane Goodall who was talking about the fact that this is not a sprint, this is a marathon. So make sure that whatever your energy is being put towards is something that you're going to continue to be able to sustain. So, you know, if it's just something that a friend is excited about, well, that's cool, go join them, but you're probably not going to keep going. And so part of what we've done is we have this live campaign now, which is essentially what I refer to as like an inspiration engine. The idea is people share their own stories about what they did and what it meant for them, how they might have failed, what succeeded, and then hopefully upload that And then that goes into a big sort of source of inspiration for other people who might be stuck thinking, what could I possibly do? And they're like, oh, I'm a school teacher. Well, there's a school teacher, and the school teacher did this. Let's give it a try. And then our hope is that we're not prescribing any specific action for you that you need to do, but we're showing a series of examples that then hopefully gives you ideas of what you can do. And then, again, the dream is that like people then upload that experience, and then it just becomes this thing that just keeps feeding other people to do something as a result of feeling inspired.
I think lastly, for everyone who is very busy and looking for something simple, Lonnie's on this website. We are raising money for Lonnie's ice core freezer. There is ice in that freezer that only exists in that freezer, and it's gone in nature, and the history inside of it needs to be preserved for future scientists to study when they have better techniques for studying the ice and all that sort of thing. And currently, the ice core freezer needs repairs. It needs to be expanded. They've even had to melt some of the less important ice in the parking lot to make room for other things.
We have if you go on the website and you see this section, which is the ice core facility part of it, you will see a scene that didn't make it into the film because it didn't fit the thing, but it is an incredibly eye-opening scene in terms of how we're prioritizing our use of funds, and even with this, all this work that Lonnie and Ellen have done, because this is an ice core collection from all over the world. That freezer is at capacity; they can't fit any more in there, and the powers that be around Lonnie haven't ever actually sort of said we're going to both fix this and increase the space. So as you'll see, as Danny just said, like they're making choices coming back from expeditions of what is the least important ice, and they're melting it in the parking lot, which is just bonkers, right? And so we are, we are hoping that audience members who, as Danny said, like, listen, I just want to do something right now immediately. I'm going to help solve this problem by helping with the fundraise campaign. We're also putting pressure on the powers that be around the institution there to do the right thing. And I think this film is helping make that happen because there's a lot of talk before, and now there's a lot of meetings, which is still talking, but we're getting closer.
That's awesome. Please visit canaryfilm.com/together. The melting ice in the parking lot brings me right to my next question, which is that so much of this is so depressing. Once your eyes are open, it's really hard not to see. And I think we're all wondering in our ways, both how can we help, but also how can we cope with these huge emotions we're feeling around climate grief and around people who are taking on this work, telling these stories, how you tell these stories day in, day out. Do you have any coping mechanisms to share? Anything that Lonnie shared with you?
Can I say a personal response to that? And
Yes.
then I think Danny has a better sort of big picture thing. I think in this process, I will be perfectly honest myself, I have gone through periods of looking at this and being like, I got a 5-year-old and a 2-year-old, like what's going to happen? And what are we doing? Sorry, I didn't expect that.
All good. I asked you about your feelings.
Yeah.
It's my fault.
Should be used to this by now. So one of the things that I came across recently in trying to understand why action matters, why doing something matters, is there was a psychologist who spoke about, separate outside of climate change, spoke about how despair is usually sort of experienced based on a sense of a lack of agency. So we feel despair because we can't control our world, we can't control what's happening around us. We don't have the freedom to do what we want to do. And climate change is one of those things that gives us that feeling because it, And so that leads us to despair. And the interesting thing about, and this is the psychologist said, is that the thing that flips that switch in your brain is doing something. So it's literally just taking one step in a direction. That action gives you the sense again that you have some control, and then helps you bring back that sense of agency, which then eliminates despair. So there is something in just doing something that will help bring you out of that the thought pattern, I guess.
So my feeling is I'm hopeful because I have met the people who are working on solving it. So Lonnie is one of many. There are armies of people who are doing things that are just magic, you know. There's all these arguments we hear in public over what's the right solution, all this thing. If you actually tune in to like a podcast where they interview these people, smartest people you've ever heard, they're working 10 problems ahead of what you hear people talking about in public, and they have solutions. Like, there are solutions for 95% of the problem at this point, and the biggest barrier is political will. So really, if you are someone who doesn't know what to do, go listen to a podcast like Volts and hear what people are talking about and what solutions are. So next time you're talking about climate change with someone who's saying renewables will never work, we need nuclear, you can go, actually nuclear is slow and renewables are really cheap and we can build them a lot faster, so they're a really good idea. So there's a degree, if you just go listen to smart people, you see there are people who have dedicated their lives to this. They're not in the muck of all the things we think the debates are, and they are just solving problems, working hard on it, slow and steady, and it's beautiful. Like, it's just people who want to make the world better, and all you got to do is talk about it. Like they say, one of the best things you can do for solving climate change is talk to people about it. Most people don't know that their friend is also thinking about it, and most people don't know what the solutions are. Most people don't know, what they should be doing. So if you join a local climate group, like Citizens Climate Lobby is great, 365 is great, there's a bunch of them. They can steer your attention towards things that are good. If you listen to a podcast, you can learn what's exciting in that world. And there's just so many people helping. And the only limit is political will right now. And we've already made big strides past that. Like the IRA that just passed and the infrastructure bill. Massive climate package, the biggest in the history of the world. And the Willow Project is a problem, yes, but that's a thing of politics, right? So the Willow Project will not do as much damage as the IRA will help. And that's a calculation politicians make because of the political will they're handed. If we work to change the politics, they won't need to do those compromises.
Yeah, I think, can I also just add, I think to recognize the institution that we're in right now, to talk about the fact that, who was it? We had a conversation recently with someone at the NRDC, and they talked about climate change being a messaging problem. That's bottom line. It's a messaging problem, and I think part of how that matters to us is that we're trying to change the framing, the thinking, and that's part of what we do with this. I think some people have their superpowers in creation of art, right? And what does art do? Art challenges us to think in a different way, to see the world in another reality, or some kind of perspective shifting games that are going on when art speaks to you. And I think that I think using your superpower, whatever that is, if art is the thing, then use that. And then again, I think that sparks a conversation, which speaks to that, and then also starts again to like reframe our thinking so that the messaging can be different. So then we can then come up with better ideas.
Can I speak to the hope aspect? One of the things I love about this story is that it's a science film, but at the end it's a film about belief, right? And Lonnie has done the incredible things that they said were impossible by teaming up with people from China, from Russia, Peru, all over the world, takes an international collaboration, accomplishes something amazing. He sees how the data of where we're headed in this kind of speeding train, but he also sees what people can do when they come together and they actually work together to solve a problem. And it is a belief in humanness and humankind and the human spirit that we can do these things. We all just need to believe in each other and work with each other. We will have small debates over this and that, but we can't be the ones fighting with each other. We have to be supporting each other and saying, let's try that solution too. I'm with you, I'm with you, I'm with you. Because when we all care about each other, then incredible things can happen. And I think that's what I think this film does show. And that's where I get hope, because it's the belief in people.
And just think about just the talking about it. Like, I mean, we are in a museum of art talking about climate change, right? Like, how cool is that, right? I mean, David Johnson, who's here, is the co-founder of the Environmental Sustainability Council.
Environmental Council.
Environmental Council, sorry. And like, from my understanding of why it came to be was that they wanted to make sure that the museum was actually doing their part as an institution as it relates to sustainability, right? And then as a byproduct of that permeates into everything. And then what else can we do? What other things can we? And then here we have a program where we're playing a film about climate change, and we're having a conversation. So I think I don't know. That's just a way of saying, like, all the things that we're saying. It's not all doom and gloom. It's not all bad. There's good shit happening in places you wouldn't expect, and I think that's awesome. And I think if we just continue to like put spotlights on those places and continue the conversations, we'll get to a better place.
I love that. Thank you. In the spirit of broadening the conversation, we'd love to open it up to Q&A from the audience. We have a mic runner here.
Thank you. Hi, excellent. Wow, that was loud. Sorry about that. Excellent movie. I'm an environmentalist. I'm from Serbia. I have seen probably, close to 100 movies on different issues. So this one is excellent because it has a story within a story within a story. Beautifully done.
Thank you.
When you said, and so I love that you also have call to action. And so obviously I've thought about this. How do we actually get to people to do something? And this is partially a messaging problem, partially communication problem, partially psychological problem, because it happens so slowly. It's not perceptually as obvious. And so we do all these things. And so why don't we do something completely different? And I feel like the three of you actually might be able to do that. You have resources, connections, knowledge, you have everything. So how do, for example, big brands promote their stuff? They contact influencers. We have, in Los Angeles, we have, 50 or 100 major people who literally shape the thinking of millions, if not billions of people on this planet. And these people, I have no idea what they're thinking about, but they obviously are not thinking about climate and environment, but they could be. They very well could be. And I'm not sure why nobody is taking that approach. And you might, you just need to go to Calabasas. It's literally a few canyons from here. And you can literally impact, with one family, a billion people.
Calabasas is the one place we didn't go making this film.
Yeah. And so but that's where you need to go, and that's what I'm saying. Like, we can all sit in these fine institutions and talk, and like, I have science background. I just got a degree in biomimicry. I can talk to you about that with like my peers, and it's so flattering. We're like indulging ourselves, right? But then you really need to go out and talk to people who like shop their food in like 99-cent store and CVS. People who are constantly on social media who will never come to see your movie. You need to reach those people. And the question is, how do we reach those people?
Good question, and we are trying to crack that. We really are. So one of the things that we've done is we have specifically started with trying to get to the core, the nucleus of the people who actually give a shit or care about this, because we think that they're the most likely to then spread the word, and then that then spreads the word, and that then spreads the word. So we have effectively, we got the film to be a part of Climate Week New York in September, which is the largest climate event in the world. We just got accepted for the film to be officially a part of COP28 in Dubai. These are no small feats. We are doing everything we can to leverage the relationships we have to push to get it into these conferences, these halls of influential people. On the local sort of Hollywood side of things, we are fighting that same battle. I mean, the reality is that we were told the whole way along making this film that no one wants to see another climate change film. No one wants to see that, And what we're discovering is that everyone who's seen this film is like, why isn't this everywhere? And we have had some huge wins along the way so far, but we're not there yet. We're just kind of starting out. The film, the film started out with a target of playing 25 screens theatrically, and through the help of our distributor and a lot of their works. We can't take credit for that. The film ended up playing in 140 screens theatrically across the country. So we just blew it out of the water. And that's coming from the AMCs, the Regals, those people of the world that they saw the film and they're like, you know what, we think we can get an audience for this. And so none of that's, we haven't cracked the code, we haven't figured out exactly, but we are trying to get the film into, again, as a strategy, into the most influential places that we think will then help spread the word further. And then part of our strategy down the road, if we are lucky enough to keep going, because as you can imagine, after 5 years of making a film, everyone's asking, okay, what's next, is we want to do things like, here's an idea, we haven't quite figured out how to do it and how to pay for it, but we know that it's a Fortune 500 companies, there's a CEO at each one of those. We'd love to get a copy of the film to each one of them. Just watch the film, see what happens. That's one idea. We have lots of starts, lots of ideas. Go ahead.
Sorry, science shows, research shows that if you, for example, think one thing, and I think a different thing, the more evidence I give you to support my thing, the more you will think what you think. You will not change your mind.
So I think...
So if you send to a person who is digging coal your movie will just further, the percentage who will really change their mind is so small, unfortunately.
Well, I think we're not talking about necessarily changing minds. I think what we're talking about is galvanizing the troops and pushing people to do more than they're doing if they're possibly open to it. If someone's not open to it, we're not going to beat them over the head with this, and this is going to change, what they're thinking. But I will say that it's interesting that there are places that you wouldn't expect where this message needs to be told. And I'll tell you just one quick anecdotal story about, unfortunately we weren't there yet in Lonnie and Ellen's life to be able to capture this. But Lonnie and Ellen were invited to go back to West Virginia to go give a talk about climate change. They had no idea what they were walking into, right? They show up, they thought maybe no one would show up. And they show up to, as a community center, I think, anyway. They show up standing room only. There's people out the door. then they're thinking, well, are they all here to throw like rotten vegetables at us? You know, like what are we're dealing with? So they give their talk, they get a standing ovation, and there's a line out the door of people who want to shake their hand and thank them for bringing this message back to West Virginia. And most of those people are teachers who brought their classrooms because it's illegal for them to teach about climate change, right? So like there are all kinds of systems in place that are getting in the way of us just getting the message across. And it's not that those people aren't necessarily open to hearing it, but they're being blocked from that information. And so, you know, I think one of our dreams with that is, again, we're not going to convince the coal miner, for example, that this is the answer, but we take the film to West Virginia and we mount a version of the same thing, and hopefully, you know, we remove a block.
Yeah, I think the other thing is we talked to a coal miner making the film, and they know it's a different world now than I think you would think, and especially from watching political media and how they frame coal miners as a victim of the green transition and what's going to happen. They know their energy is more expensive than renewables, and it affects them, and that's not going to change. It's past that point. So I think there's a degree where the thing to do is show people that there's a reason to look forward and there's a reason to keep going, because there's a lot of jobs coming back to those places. In Ohio, where Lonnie's from, there's billion-dollar factories going up, and those people who couldn't get a job working in a factory now can. So I think on that front, the policy is going to do a lot of work. And then also, I think Lonnie always says, when our back's against the wall and, you know, our AC is out and we're in a heat wave or there's wildfire smoke, that's when people wake up. And we're seeing that happen on a yearly basis.
I just wanted to add that since it was so depressing that they're pretty much melting these, you know, drillings in a parking lot, that they should sell them, and you know, they should sell and say like this was collected at this, you know, expedition, and if you fund us for a bigger refrigerator, we send you a piece of this ice which will be marked with like, you know.
Yeah. So the question was for anyone, or the suggestion was for anyone who didn't hear, is that we suggest that they sell off pieces of the ice in order to fund the freezer. I think it's unfortunately very complicated, and it's not that easy to do, and a lot of it's to do with the fact that like a lot of this ice was funded by, you know, all kinds of different funders, including the government, and they can't just do whatever they want with it. So there's it's no ones to actually do that, you know.
We're going to take this question over here.
Sorry, thank you so much. The movie was brilliant.
Thank you.
We really appreciate all the work, and I'm sure it wasn't easy. Contrary to the scientists, I'm not a scientist, but I really don't think the problem is the public knowledge. I think majority of people in the United States and way more than that around the world know about climate change. I think the problem is the politics, the power of the lobbyists. As you mentioned in your movie, the most powerful lobbyists. So we had 10 candidates last time, Republicans. All of them denied climate change, and one of them, Donald Trump, became the president of the United States. And I think the problem is much deeper than what we know and what we can do. And I think the problem, as you try to establish the political problem.
You're absolutely right. And, you know, what percentage of us drove here on the very vehicles? That's I mean, I'm not saying like, but, you know, that's something that as a society we need to think about too, right? And I think we can lessen their power by shaping our behavior. And it's, you know, the cost curve is shifting so that more of us can start to do that.
But also in terms of the influence over politicians, ultimately, they work for whoever is paying them, right, in one hand. But the other hand is that if enough people make enough noise, then that's the other end of the power, right? So unless we, I just think we have to make as much noise as possible and then affect those who are in power to say, like, it's impossible for me to not do something about this.
Yeah, I think another thing is just, it's what you're speaking to is there's a partisan political will problem, and even though some Republicans care about climate change, farmers are affected by it, the base, which is electing people, doesn't believe it's real for whatever reason. We saw some of the reasons here, but I think what it comes down to is, in the civil rights movement, I think Ella Baker talked about how you need 1,000 candles instead of one spotlight. And I think we need more artists out there making art that speaks to climate change. We need more people talking about it, more teachers teaching it. And like, my hope is that this film is a tool that if there's a teacher in those states that are electing congressmen that don't believe in climate change, this is something they can show in their school. This is something they can get a kid to be talking about their parents, about Lonnie Thompson. And like, it's not the thing that's gonna solve all of climate change, but if you take this film, if you take what those people I talked about on the podcast who are working on solutions, if you take the politicians that are fighting the good fight, I think it all adds up to something eventually, even against the systemic biases that we're up against.
So I wanted to push back a little bit on something the earlier speaker asked about, which is you can't really change people's views. One of the reasons we wanted to make this film was we thought it isn't a climate film exactly. It's a film about Lonnie. And so, it's just anecdotally, when we started making this thing, I happened to have a cocktail in New York with a friend who's extraordinarily conservative, very big business, very Republican, very all of that. And he said, "Oh, gee, what are you working on?" I said, "Oh, we're doing this thing on climate." And he literally started yelling at me. "That's just total bullshit." That's, I was laughing when I saw the thing about the bullshit and the. So I said, "No, it's really what is about this guy from West Virginia, went to a non-Ivy League place. I do all this stuff about Lonnie's story." He said, "That really does sound very interesting. Would love to see that." So I think it's really the way in which the story is told. It's about the individual. It's really not exactly about climate. You can't not know about the climate if you watch the film, but it's really more about Lonnie and his. He is an incredible person. Grit. His background is unbelievable. The West Virginia thing, incredibly poor. All of that, and even still incredibly humble. One of the questions, I'm going to combine two questions. One of the things I was going to ask Adam to tell was this story about recently, he's kind of a star now, right, with the film, and he was in Columbus, where he lives, and he went to some breakfast place, Jimmy Dean, I think. Is it?
What's the breakfast
Jimmy
place?
Dean, I think. It's a very basic breakfast place, like Denny's, but it's not Denny's, but it's like that.
Yeah. Jimmy Dean's
Jimmy Dean,
sausages.
yeah, that's it. Okay, so
Lonnie and Ellen
Yeah.
went there because that's where they like to go for their breakfast when they're traveling in West Virginia and in Ohio. And when they went to pay the bill, someone had already paid it because they'd seen the film.
And they thought that was so great that they specifically called to mention it. So there's a great humility that I think really comes through in the film.
I love that.
Completely agree.
Well, thank you so much. I think we're at time, but please come and chat down here. I'm offering them up their services to talk, but
We're at
thank you
your
so much.
service. You came to see our film.
Thank you.
Thank you for
Everyone,
coming
have a
out. Thank you very much.